In today's Farm Report, good digestion for dairy cows can impact milk production. Jim Sulphur with the University of Minnesota Extension Service Office shares more.
Physiology of cows eating and what really makes cows stop eating and eat, because of course in order to get cows to produce well, we got to have good intake because they can't make milk out of air. I think often we don't think about it. We see these cows ruminating and we see them eating, but we don't often concentrate a lot. If you're a dairy producer, if you're a nutritionist, which I was in a former life, you really spend a lot of time thinking about what makes cows eat and what encourages them to eat. But I think it's good for maybe dairy producers to think a little bit about that. To me, at least when I was doing diets for a living, the key to get cows to milk is to get that carbohydrate fraction balanced correctly. And cows eat about 70% of their diet is carbohydrates. So when you think about it, all the fibers are considered a carbohydrate. All your starches and your grains are carbohydrates. So I know we spend a lot of time talking about vitamins and minerals and mycotoxin binders, but really I think the money to be made is in getting that carbohydrate fraction correct. And when you look at it, when we measure fiber in feed, most of you may have heard the term NDF, or neutral detergent fiber. That's all of the fiber in a feed. And so we kind of balance the fiber in feed with rapidly degradable carbohydrates, which would be like the starches and the sugars, no different than the starches and sugars we eat. And the reason it's important to get those balanced is too high a fiber really limits intakes, especially on our high-producing cows, because they're limited by room and fill. So that's basically how much physically they can eat. Kind of like you eat at Thanksgiving, you eventually get to a point where you're stuffed full. And what causes those cows to be stuffed full, especially those early lactation cows, is the amount of fiber in that diet. That's what they ruminate on. So once they get full, they have to quit eating and ruminate. And so if we feed low fiber levels and too much starch and sugar, then we tend to get sick cows that go off of feed because they don't have enough fiber, they don't do their ruminating. And so that's really the key to me, is to get those balanced. So kind of observe, and I'll be talking about rumination, but I think it's important to observe rumination, observe your cow's behavior, how do they eat. One of the things we can look at is their manure and see what that maybe looks like. And so the other things that really affect cows eating is make sure they have feed in front of them all the time, or any time that they want to eat. Because again, if they don't have feed, they get hungry, they tend to gorge themselves, they tend to have some problems with some rumen pHs. Consider illness. If a cow's not eating, is she sick? Or make sure everything else is in situation like heat stress, poor ventilation, any kind of stresses on cows tend to watch them. So if your intakes fluctuate a fair amount, make sure you visit with your nutritionist and think about what might not quite be right in those diets. This has been Jim Sulphur with the University of Minnesota Extension in St. Cloud.
This week is National FFA Week, and as part of the celebration, the Little Falls chapter of the FFA will be hosting lunchtime activities. Aaron Daninger, FFA advisor for Little Falls, explains.
Mostly celebrating FFA and our teachers who help make FFA possible. So we will have lunchtime activities for students, dress-up days that coordinate with agriculture, and mostly with FFA colors and celebrating the pride of FFA, along with a teacher and staff breakfast.
Little Falls FFA chapter advisor Aaron Daninger. FFA Week runs through Saturday. For Little Falls Radio, this is Farm Director Scott Colombe reporting. The USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service released its numbers on Thursday. Dan Martins with the University of Minnesota Extension Service Office shares the details.
The Ag Statistics Service county average yields for corn and soybeans were posted on their website on Thursday afternoon. Part of the interest in these numbers is to see how they might impact the Farm Bill program payment projections in the Ag Risk Coverage, or ARC, county-based program option. Let's take a look at corn first. For corn in Stearns County, the average yield for 2014 was listed at 133.9 compared to 133.5 in 2013. That compares to a simple 5-year average of 154 and a 10-year average of 142. By a simple 5-year average, I mean averaging all 5 years, rather than the Olympic average where you drop the high and the low and average the remaining 3. For corn in Morrison County, the average yield for 2014 was 117.3 compared to 87.4 in 2013. That compares to a 5-year average of 137 and a 10-year average of 118. For corn in Benton County, the average yield was listed at 90.3 for 2014 compared to 94.7 for 2013. That compares to a 5-year average of 133 and a 10-year average of 116. So regarding the Farm Bill, actual 2014 yields for Stearns and Morrison County are a little lower than the yields used in earlier projections, and that reduces the projected ARC county-based payments, but not drastically. This happens because the lower 2014 yield reduces the Olympic average benchmark that the 2015 actual year revenue would be compared to. For Benton County, it looks like using the 90-bushel 2014 yield rather than the 131 that was used in the original projections reduces the projected ARC county-based payment for the 2015 year from $50 per acre to zero. That would be a more significant change. I used the Illinois calculation tools to look at this. You can check my math. This change might not mean that you would make a different program choice, but it could change how you anticipate the ARC County payment turning out for the 2015 crop. The 2015 payments are still dependent on how the average national price turns out for the 2015 crop. Remember, through 2018, projections continue to be based on guesstimates about average national prices and yields. You can find the county average yields by doing a website search for Minnesota Ag Statistics and then click on County Estimates in the middle of the page. I expect you'll be hearing and reading more about this over the next week or so. You're welcome to give me a call if you'd like help finding the information. February 27 is the deadline for making Farm Bill decisions about yield and acreage bases, and March 31st for program choices. Call your FSA office for an appointment. I'm Dan Martins with U of M Extension, and I hope you're considering the March 3rd Barriers to Bushels workshop in Little Falls on March 3rd and the Nitrogen Management Conference in St. Cloud on March 6th. And welcome to National FFA Week, February 22nd through the 28th.
The nation's dairy producers are likely to see margins shrink as production grows as we go through 2015. USDA livestock analyst Shale Chagam told the USDA Outlook Forum that margins are going to be under some pressure.
We do expect returns in 2015 to weaken. Milk prices are going to be lower. However, we will see feed prices remaining moderate and probably the improved availability of alfalfa in much of the country.
Because of high prices this past year,
we do expect to see an increase in production to about 211.5 billion pounds on an increase in cow numbers.
Now, that production increase could amount to 2.7%. The growth in the herd, only about 0.7%. Milk per cow going up an average of just under 2%. All of this production, plus Russia's ban on buying dairy products from the U.S., plus China's big cutback in dairy imports, will force the all-milk average price down from almost $24 a hundredweight last year to about $17.75 this year, the lowest price in 5 years. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.